All right. Thank you very much, Attorney McFarland. Now we're going to move on to Dr. Sivaya Nengomasha. She is a distinguished figure within the ADRA community. Sivaya brings a wealth of experience and expertise to our Congress today. Hailing from Zimbabwe, she is not only the spouse of Mr. Edward Nengomasha, but also a devoted mother to two accomplished adult children. With over 16 years of dedicated service to ADRA, Zivaya's journey has been marked by significant contributions, culminating in her recent appointment as the Chief Collective Impact Officer at ADRA International. In her previous role as Programs and Planning Director for ADRA Africa Regional Office in Nairobi, Kenya, she demonstrated exemplary leadership and a keen understanding of humanitarian and development issues. Sivaya holds a PhD in animal science with a specialization in rangeland ecology, complemented by a master's degree in international development. Her commitment to improving the lives of vulnerable children and youth through innovative multi country programs is both inspiring and impactful. Without any further ado, let us welcome Dr. Sivaya Nengomasha.
Thank you so much. Sometimes when people are talking about you, you're like, oh, that's me, right? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm going to take a bit of a different direction from the speakers who've come in the morning and talk about ADRA and the ministry of ADRA to orphans and vulnerable children. And we have a very nice topic, which says, reaching the vulnerable with connections, actions speak louder than words. And the reason why we say action speaks louder than words is because if you look at the identity statement about ADRA, we say the Adventist Development and Relief Agency is a global humanitarian organization of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that demonstrates love and compassion. So our key there is the demonstration. Whatever we do as ADRA must demonstrate God's love and compassion. And our purpose is to serve humanity so all may live as God intended. And we can go on a serious theological tangent there to explore and say, what did God intend? And one of the things that we've said in ADRA is that Christ says, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. So how can people live more abundantly? We need justice. We need compassion. We need love. And we draw that from Micah 6:8, which says, he has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. In the over 117 countries where ADRA is present, that is what we seek to do every single day. Now, talking about orphans and vulnerable children, I just want to give you a little bit of statistics. And I know throughout the week you've been getting different stats, and I think that really opens our minds and our understanding to the magnitude of the issues that we're dealing with. So I got that stat, which is just giving us the population breakdown of children under 15 in the world. So according to the stat I got, we have just over 2 billion of children under 15 worldwide, right? And we are almost approaching 8 million in population, 8 billion in population. And you can see the distribution of children from one continent to another, with the highest being in Africa. 40% of the population is actually children under 15, a very youthful continent. And then Latin America at 23%, and the world average is 25%. But you can see North America and Europe, they are below 20%. And according to UNICEF, 1.4 billion aged below 15, which is 17% of the proportion of children under 15, they are in some form of social protection, or they lack that. They leave them with vulnerable diseases, poor nutrition, poverty. So can you imagine that of the 2 billion we are talking about, 70% are vulnerable? That's the long and short of it. And I hope that it awakens in us the magnitude of the ministry that we have before us. And what is vulnerability? It is the outcome of the interaction of a range of individual environmental factors that compound dynamically over time. Vulnerability is complicated. That's the long and short of it. It is complicated. It's not only one thing. It's not only the lack of food. The lack of food is probably being caused by the fact that the parents don't have an income. The parents do not have an income because probably they do not have education. They do not have education because probably there are other inequalities that are happening in the society. So vulnerability becomes complicated. And we actually, in ADRA, when we are doing needs assessments, it always comes out very clearly that it's a complex problem. And complex problems cannot be solved by simple solutions. They have to be system-wide solutions that address issues. So consider these factors which contribute to child vulnerability, for example. That at an individual level, it could be issues of different disabilities. It could be mental health difficulties. It could be the issue that they are of an immigrant background, whether they are legal or they are not. It could just be issues of maltreatment, and maltreatment can come in different forms at home, in the community. It could be just the poor out-of-home care that they are receiving. And then it can be caused by environmental issues, such as material deprivation. When we say material deprivation, it could be just accessing healthcare, accessing good education. It could be clothes, it could be food. And then the parents themselves, if their health is not good, it could be a trigger. It could be an issue that causes vulnerability, or even their health behaviors. Some parents are alcoholics, some of them are addicted to drugs, and this impact the children. And then the parents' educational level also increases vulnerability. The lower the educational level, generally stats have shown that the higher the vulnerability of the children. And I think you can understand why that would be the case. With the lower educational level, the kind of employment that you access, then the kind of income that you can make. Then, so can you see the ripple effect that I mentioned right at the beginning? And then, of course, there are issues of intimate partner violence that happens. A lot of families where there is intimate partner violence, it happens in the presence of the children. They are right there at home. They are not shielded from these things. And then, of course, family stress. I remember one time when my son was young, and I was saying to him, he says, "Mama, I would like this." I say, "I don't have money." "And I would like this, and I don't have money." He says, "What is your problem?" Other parents just line up at the bank, they withdraw money, and then they do things for their children. And I said, it's because they have money in the bank. So can you imagine family stress when you continue to be told, "Oh, you can only have one meal, you can't have a lot, you cannot have this," because the resources are so limited. And then, of course, the schools sometimes there are too many students in one class. They don't get attention, and they are not seen, so they cannot easily be protected because the schools probably are underfunded. And then the neighborhoods can be generally unsafe. So in ADRA, we do have different interventions in different countries. And I will not profile some of the countries because of the sensitivities or some of the interventions we're doing, but I just want to give you a feel of the work that we are doing. For example, we have a program for keeping girls safe, just protecting them from abuse and exploitation and trafficking. And one of the big activities within there is to provide shelter for girls who are at risk, and to sensitize the communities so that they are aware, they are conscious of what's happening, and they can alert if a girl is in trouble. And then, of course, training on human rights and online dangers to the girls so that they are protected. And when I was discussing with this particular group, they said one of their big achievements is that church leaders now have increased awareness about this risk, because sometimes we have an expectation when we've not raised awareness, and then we have issues of trying to reduce statelessness. So you have children who are going around without a birth certificate, they don't have birth registration, they don't have a legal status where they are. And ADRA works hard and advocates for children like this so that they can be registered. And we've been making really good strides, because once they have their birth registrations, quite a number have now been enrolled in schools. And then, of course, when people are displaced from their countries and they become refugees, education is normally disrupted. And ADRA is working really hard to make sure that they are teaching and learning materials in refugee camps in different countries, and improving the learning infrastructure within these camps, because it's never adequate, it's never really up to scratch. But ADRA has done that in many countries, in several continents, and also providing career guidance, because we believe that there will be an opportunity when these children grow and they can relocate to their countries, to prepare them for relocation, so that they can, when they go home to their countries, they will be able to fit in with a way to earn a livelihood. And then, of course, sometimes it's because people are internally displaced within their countries due to conflict and insecurities. And you know that there are many conflicts and insecurities in different parts of the world. And when working here, we distribute food as a necessity. We also look at issues of hygiene. And just to say that when we're looking at issues of hygiene for children and the youths, we are paying attention to an issue that is generally quite neglected, which we call menstrual hygiene. You will be so surprised that in many countries, this is highly neglected, and the girl child becomes extremely affected, unable to go to school or participate, just because they do not have access to menstrual hygiene kits. So there are a lot of initiatives in multiple countries where mothers are being taught how to make recyclable menstrual hygiene kits. You're agreeing with that? Yes. And the young girls are now getting an opportunity to be in school 5 days a week throughout the month during the learning time, because sometimes they miss a quarter of the school time every month. Other initiatives that we have is just protection and humanitarian assistance. So whenever there are instabilities, insecurities, internal displacements, refugee situations, issues of protection become a very high issue, because if they do not have, for example, food in this case, then they can end up being sexually exploited to access food, to access goods and services. So we distribute food vouchers. And the reason why we actually distribute vouchers and sometimes do what we call cash transfer is because we want to still give people choices and options. When we decide for them what they're going to eat, we are depriving them of choices, and it's almost like a master servant kind of relationship, isn't it? But when we give them vouchers, they can go to the shop, they pick what they want. If it is not rice they want and they want cassava, they can pick the cassava. If they don't want beans but they would like some soya chunks, they can pick that. So these things have also improved in the humanitarian sector to give people more options and to also support local economies as we do that. But in situations where the markets have really been run down due to insecurities, we still do distribute food. directly so that people can meet their needs. So you can actually see there is a program that ADRA has been doing in multiple countries, providing food in schools. And now we created a new problem, which is massive enrollments. So suddenly we need to have more schools or expand the schools, because that school meal is the one hot meal that the children might be having like every day. So they don't miss school because they want to have their meal. And at the same time, because they have food, their performance is also improving. And then I mentioned it, I think, a little bit yesterday, that, issues of malnutrition are real and need to be addressed. So we have severe and acute malnutrition in some parts of the world, and ADRA has been doing huge work for years to make sure that children under 5 are treated for malnutrition, and that there's also prevention. So we have, for example, mothers clubs where mothers are taught about how to prepare food, how to feed their children, infant and young child feeding, and so forth, and quite a lot of work there. And this is combined with some psychosocial care for these families. And then, of course, we also work hard to restore livelihoods, because remember when I was talking about some of the things that make children vulnerable, it's when families are in poverty. But if families would have livelihood options, they would happily take care of their own children. So we do not want people to continue to be dependent on ADRA, but we would like them to graduate and start to also save their own communities. So we work with that. And then, of course, we have initiatives in some countries like just direct sponsoring of for school fees. And this particular case is in Kenya, where church members actually just contribute every term so that children can be in school. And I just put some pictures there so you can see. This is a baby who's getting, we call it plumpy nut. There's a high protein supplement for a child, and then you can see the agriculture initiatives. Even the children, we start to also train them how to produce food in their schools. They do school gardens so that they can develop these skills. And then, of course, just accessing water. And this next lot of pictures, I think Pastor Ven will be very pleased with this, because in Somalia, in the schools, we actually have made provisions for Braille. You can see that. And this is sign language in a school in Somalia as well. I just took some Somalia pictures here, where ADRA is actually doing the largest education interventions in the country. So really doing some great work there. And of course, we don't do it alone. We have lots of different partners. We partner with the government, we partner with international organizations, with the local leaders, whether they are civic or traditional, with the SDA Church, where there is a church presence, private companies, hospitals, schools. We have, just to name a few institutions. And in the remaining minutes, I just want to share with you a particular case study of how ADRA has partnered with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in a particular program. And I am using this as an example of how we would want to see our partnership going forward worldwide. So this particular case is a partnership which ADRA has with the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Southern Africa, in 5 countries, in Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zambia. And this has been going on for quite a number of years. This program is called Young and Empowered, and it's actually funded by the Swedish Mission Council. So the Swedish Mission Council is a coming together of non-governmental organizations that are Christian-based. So different ones, including ADRA Sweden, and then they receive funds from the Swedish government and partner with ADRA Africa. And the vision there is for children and youths to have improved quality lives and experience psychological, social, economic, and spiritual well-being. And I'm just emphasizing this because as we intervene, as we work with orphans and vulnerable children, we have to look at them holistically and say, how can we touch on the different areas where they're affected? And if we achieve the mission, then we want to see children and youth who are resilient and who are strong socially, in their human, in economic, and in their environment, and they are really able to function and experience the fullness of life. So remember that I mentioned that we are using tools from the Youth Alive. So with you, this is the foundation of what Youth Alive is all about. So Youth Alive is based on something called the Circle of Courage model. And in this model, it starts by looking at the belonging that every child, every youth wants to belong. And if they are not belonging to a healthy group, they will belong to a gang or an unhealthy group. Everybody wants to belong. So one of the things that we do in this program is to establish what we call friendship groups. And in these groups, there are like 10 in a group, and then with 2 peer counselors and a mentor. And within this group, they get to know each other. They become a family. They hang out and they support each other and they talk to each other. These mentors are actually trained in community-based counseling and psychosocial support for young people. They are trained in HIV and AIDS and sexual and reproductive health. They are trained how to give life skills training. They are given a lot of training. And these are mentors. These are volunteers. These are Seventh-day Adventists, most of them. We now have others from other faiths because they've seen how it's working and they want to be part of it. And they are trained. And they cascade, they pass on this training to the peer counselors who also work with these groups. And in these groups, they play, they talk about different things. They even raise their concerns. In these groups, they are heard. And in these groups, they build confidence because with the life skills, you can actually see them starting to have healthy self-esteem, and you can see them being able to stand in front and share what they are learning. The sense of belonging is extremely critical. And this is the foundation of this particular program. And then from there, we work with them to build their sense of independence. When we say independence, it's not to disconnect or detach. It is independent thinking, being able to make their own decisions rather than being pressured by their peers to do the things that they do not want to do. So they get tools on how to make decisions, how to evaluate different options, how to look at different circumstances, and they're able to make good choices for themselves, and they can start to trust themselves and even be trusted by their parents, that even when they're away from them and guardians, they will be making the right decisions. And because these children have been growing in the program, I think you can see we started in 2019, but the actual program started way before that. We started with dealing with the parents, but the child focus started in earnest in 2019. Because they grow, we do not abandon them. We then continue to work with them so that they can go into technical vocational educational schools and to acquire technical skills so that they can either be self-employed or they can be formally employed and earn a livelihood. When they have a sense of belonging and they can, make independent choices and they have mastery, which are skills to share, we then intentionally support them to do community service. And they do community service not as a once-off, not on as an annual thing like, oh, youth come together, let's do community service. They do it consistently. And why is that? Research has actually shown that when young people are engaged in community service, they actually delay their first sexual debut. So they do not, they will delay engaging in sex because they have found purpose and meaning and something that is beneficial. So they serve their communities. So the way we actually work with them is to say, find something that you do long term. So some of them go into their communities and start to reclaim gullies. Some of them go in and they're planting trees. Some go and fetch firewood for the elderly and clean for them consistently. So they look at the needs within their communities, and that is what they do. So we always, as I said on Monday, that the donors always buy change. It is the change that we are selling that they buy. So in our thinking and in our pathway of change, we believe that if the young people are stable psychologically, and they receive life skills, and they engage in community service, and they have technical skills, and their moral duty bearers are actually doing what they should do, and they change their behaviors, then they will have a better quality of life. But we also know that change in the lives of children, change in the lives of youth cannot happen in isolation. There are others who need to also change in order for life to be better for orphans and vulnerable children. And when we were doing our needs assessment, we identified the Seventh-day Adventist Church as the first to change. And we targeted the youth department intentionally to say, you need to start thinking about orphans and about children and youth, about the vulnerable in a different way. You need to be more intentional in your programming. So we looked and said, well, they're not really teaching them, because you see, the foundation of this program was the issue of the HIV and AIDS. As most of you may know, Southern Africa still has the highest prevalences of HIV and AIDS, with Eswatini having the highest rates in the world of about 24 to 26%, and then others still in the double digits, right? So we started to say, but are you talking to them about these things? Are you intentionally programming to reduce the vulnerabilities? Because some of them, unfortunately, they end up contracting HIV and AIDS because they're engaged in transactional sex to earn a living. So we've put together a package of training and of dialogue and engagement with the Seventh-day Adventist Church to say, you have a responsibility. You need to work with the young people. So as we look at the change in behavior of the orphans and vulnerable children, we are also looking at specific indicators for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Then we realize that, you know what, these children are in a community, and there are other faith groups in the community. So we cannot ignore, because these are their friends, they interact. If we're going to transform, we need to transform a community together. So we started engaging with other faith groups, and we thank God that we found favor with a lot of them. Some of them have invited them as themselves to say, you know what, we are seeing the change in the young people in the Seventh-day Adventist groups. Come to our church and train the same thing. So we've been working with traditional faiths. We've been working with the Pentecostal faiths. We've been working with the Catholic Church. We've been working with the Muslim community, and they are very open. So we've also been taking through the same journey. But we then also realize that sometimes we get pushback because there are traditional values and beliefs that prejudice children. For example, issues of early marriages. And if we do not change the mindsets of the community leaders, we will not be able to protect the children. So we've also come up with interventions to engage with the traditional leaders, with the civic leaders, to say, you know what, if this is the future you want for the children, this is the journey we need to walk. And so we are also working with them and watching their behavior change towards the children. And it's very interesting because in Zambia, for example, one of the young people, a youth, they ended up appointing him to be a community representative, because they said, we've seen how this young man has really shaped up and the way he's now conducting himself. So he's now a community leader recognized by the government within the structures. And we're like, yeah, that's, beautiful things are actually happening. But we also realize that parents and guardians can also be a challenge for the orphans and children. And it's not because they do not care. Sometimes it's because they do not have the skills, parenting skills, basic things like that, how to discuss some of these issues with their children, how to navigate taboos which are affecting the children. And so we also came up with materials, which I shared with you on Monday, for parenting skills to improve also the parents. And we are tracking them for behavior change. So we now have parenting groups or parenting clubs where parents are actually learning parenting and giving each other tips. How do you do it? How do we do this together? And then, of course, remember I mentioned that we have the mentors, and these mentors are key. And we do not, just because I can volunteer to be a mentor doesn't mean that I have the right attitude, that I have the right understanding, that I have the right skill set. So I also need to change my behavior, my attitude, my thinking towards orphans and vulnerable children. So we also have specific training to target the mentors so that they too can be transformed. So it's a very interesting program because it's about change all around. Whoever is engaging with the orphans and the children and the youth, they have to be changed too. So even as ADRA personnel, because I was part of it when I was in ADRA Africa, we had to change. I remember in one of the planning meetings, we had to bring in a pastor who's also a psychologist and counselor, because we realized some of us had a baggage in our own lives which was hindering us from effectively engaging in a very meaningful way with the children. And the mentors actually said, we also need to be counseled, because we are discovering that some of the things we enjoyed as young people, we were being abused. We've gone through traumas. So sometimes we've had to take pastors to sit with the mentors and to counsel them and to work with them. So it's change for everybody all around. So what are we saying? In this program, we are very intentional because ADRA actually signs an MOU with Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division, and also signs it with the respective conferences. And then the church also supports selection and vetting of mentors. So you can't become a mentor unless you are vetted by your pastor and cleared, vetted by the police and cleared, vetted by the community leaders and cleared at those levels, because we do not assume that just because you're a church member, you might not be prone to certain ways. And then with local churches, they actually assign local church leaders to be in the steering committee of the program. So we have them, the church, in the leadership of the program, so that they can get reports from the ADRA team and they can feed in. And it's so interesting that they have evolved. Like I know in Eswatini, they said we need the police as part of the steering committee, because we need them to understand what we are doing so that when there are cases of abuse, they are dealt with immediately. So they are part of it. And then we've also, the church has provided complementary funds from the SID and from the Adventist AIDS International Ministries for now the youths to start income generating initiatives so that they can be independent. And women's ministries, men's ministries, they come in to train life skills. So we go to them and say, okay, these young children need to be taught how to clean a house. So women's ministries organizes, or how to cook, and women's ministries organizes. And then the men can say, okay, we will show them how to do gardening. In Mozambique, it's so beautiful because they have a beautiful garden where the children are actually gardening with their parents, and they work together, and they're actually able to sell and to supplement some of the needs of the young children. And then, of course, ADRA does what ADRA does best, which is for us, we develop the proposal, meeting the technical rigor that the donors require. We make sure we are managing and implementing according to those standards and reporting, and also building the capacity, developing the materials or identifying materials, and supporting different advocacy initiatives. And we always do joint planning with the church. And I'm actually pleased to say that because of this, in several countries, they now put, the project is called Young and Empowered, so we call it YEP. They now put YEP activities in the church calendar so that it doesn't clash with anything. They make themselves available to do that. And so what is ADRA's ask when it comes to the church and ADRA working together when it comes to overseas? Our ask is this: local church members should take interest and seek to understand the social issues in their communities. Let us not live in a community and be disconnected from the realities that are affecting us. The local church should open its doors to partner with ADRA in OVC programming. And in this particular program, the church is actually providing its grounds as meeting spaces. And we are also establishing what we are calling children and youth-friendly centers. And sometimes it's just a roofed space where young people meet, they play games, and they meet up and they talk about different issues, a safe space where they can go instead of in places where their parents cannot even see them, and they are able to interact in a healthy way. We are also asking the church to be available to be trained as volunteers, as trainers, as mentors to support overseas, and to pay attention to issues such as child protection, sexual exploitation, so that the Seventh-day Adventist Church can be the beacon of light and example to the other faith communities around them. And then to also partner with ADRA to advocate for overseas. So we are saying the local churches cannot be silent. They should say, ADRA, let us go to the chief. Let us discuss this issue, what is going on, or whoever needs to be engaged. And then for conferences, unions, and divisions, we see a lot of opportunity to develop specific training materials tailored for church members. Because even when we are talking about sexual and reproductive health, we have to tailor the material because some of the content does not align with our values as Adventists. And we've received a lot of support from AIM to make sure that these things are tailored. So this is something that the unions and divisions can actually do. And to complement the resources that ADRA mobilizes, they are never enough. Right now, the crisis, like with this particular program, is so many children want to enroll. Schools are coming to us to say we are having behavioral issues. Can you come and establish this program in our schools? And we're saying we don't have any more resources. So imagine the opportunities that are opening up because they can see how it's working, but we are limited in resources. And to also practice the protection principles. So in closing, I just want to throw these 4 questions at to challenge all of us who are here right now. And the first one is to say, what first steps can your mission or conference or union division take to start partnering with ADRA in OVC programming? What are the first steps that you can take? How can partnership with ADRA for OVC programming be institutionalized at all levels? How can it stop being just something that happens with one local church, but it will be something that happens in all churches within your conference and so forth? And then the third one, what positive outcomes do you foresee with a partnership between ADRA and the church? Do you see it as something that can have positive outcomes? And finally, what concerns do you have about partnership between ADRA and the church in OVC programming? I want us to just limit it to OVC programming. There are many other things we can do together, but we remain focused. So I thought as I close, I want to challenge you to think about these 4 things because that can pave the way forward in terms of what we can do together. Thank you so much.